Hey guys, and welcome to another monster review. And today I'm going to discuss Brian. He's he's my favorite reviver. I use him a lot, not only in PvE but also in PvP. Or little bit less often now in PvP, but I think he's still a pretty. If you build him um, correctly, he can be used pretty well on offensive teams. At least for Guild Wars, maybe not so much for Arena. But these are the stats on my Brian, and these are the runes. Okay, you will notice here that my Brian is quite fast, and even on slot 2 HP. And there's a really good reason for that. You can stack a lot of HP substats on your Brian. Right? You can get him to like 50, 60,000 HP, but there's really no need for him to be that tanky. You can do it, but like why bother? So instead, I focus more on speed substats and try to make him pretty fast, right? So like if I can get HP substats here and there, I by all means, it's nice to have. You can grind them up. But I think it's better to go for speed, right? Especially if you're going to use him in PvP. And he's typically built on Despair. Now with Despair runes, there's not going to be a lot of units fighting for Despair, alright? Maybe just Beretta, and maybe like one or two other PvP units. So you can afford to give Brian some pretty good Despair runes. He actually has my second best lot of Despair runes, my first being going to Praha, and your PvE Despair units like Beretta, say Varad, Wuchi, those sort of units that you probably only use in TOA hard. You don't have to give them like super amazing runes. You can give them it's like the more leftover sort of runes. So yeah, any unit that I use in PvP, I typically try to give them my best quality runes, right? Because I'm using them in the most important areas of the game. And he's got very high base HP, as you can see. He's got one of the highest base HP out of all the units in the game. I think it's among the top 10 or something. And because of that, it's very easy for him to reach 40,000 or more HP, which is what you want to aim for. And give him like a little bit of defense as well. It helps in places like TOA hard. If you purely using him for PvE and not using him for PvP, you can instead build him on something like HP defense, and that will make him even more tankier. Right? He'll have a less HP pool, but he'll take less damage. Alright, and that's really good for environments where you can control, like having defense break on you, right? So in places like TOA hard, you're gonna bring like cleansing, right? You're probably gonna bring your Veromos in there too, and he can remove the defense break for you. So that means it's not so bad for him to have a defense rune, and that way it also helps make use of the defense runes with speed substats that you probably kept because it's a nice rune with speed subs. But it's not really useful for a lot of your PvP monsters. It's pretty hard to use like defense runes on PvP monsters unless they actually scale with defense, like say a Vela Jewel or any of the defense type nukers. So Brian can make use of those. Now for his rune sets, I think Despair is the best, right? Especially if you can get him to max skill with the third skill here, the revive. The reason I say that is because the skill ups give him a cooldown reduction, right? So it's -1 per skill up. So the base amount of turns cooldown, like turns, is 8 turns, and that's a very long time. So if you don't have skill ups on your Brian, you're probably gonna want him to put him on Violent so that he can refresh himself, easier. But if it's max skill, then I think you should bring Despair, put Despair on him for additional utility, right? And for the reason is because on his second skill he does an AOE. This is an attack power debuff, and when it's max skill, it's 100% chance to land, right? Barring resistance check, it's 100% chance to land. and or at least to apply. I think that's the better word to use. Okay, so and attacking every unit in TOA hard and stunning like a couple of them or one or two of them, it helps a lot with your crowd control. And even in PvP, it's really nice utility to stun things like a Fuel Mars or a Jasoon or something like that. And in the first skill, it's a heal block, right, which is quite nice in PvP and PvE as well. There's a lot of times where, like say for the TOA male 100, the male boss on floor 100, he has a self heal based on like when you deal damage to him, he sort of deals damage back to you and leeches life. So usually when he's on floor 100 on TOA hard, I always bring Brian so that once I kill the crystals and I'm ready to hit the boss straight out, I bring I put stick everyone on him, and Brian will apply the heal block for me. The chance to apply is 80% when it's max skill, so it's not 100% reliable, but it's still pretty decent for a skill 1. And for that reason as well, Revenge makes him really it's a really nice offset, especially combined with Despair. Like Despair Revenge is a very nice synergetic combination. But you can also use, say, Will if you're going to use him more for PvP. Nemesis also is fine. Worst comes to worst, you can give him one of the stat boosting offsets like Energy, Guard, or Endure. Those all work, right? He doesn't specifically need Revenge, but it's if you have this good enough stats and you can afford to give up, the set bonus of the other ones, then Revenge is a nice, extra utility that you can give him. Additionally, you probably want to try to give him a bit of accuracy. Mine has basically no accuracy, but it is nice to have accuracy if you can afford to on your runes. Okay, and resistance is also a nice bonus as well. Now, and some people, like worst case scenario, if you don't have a frontline unit, you could build Brian for frontline in raids. I wouldn't recommend it because he doesn't add a lot compared to a DS, right? And if you don't have a DS, you probably would use a Darien instead. But if you are absolutely desperate for a resist leader, you can use a Brian, maybe only for like progression, right? Like progressing through R4, but eventually you probably want to switch it to a Darien or something like that. Or fuse a panda, like the fire panda, right? So before the fire panda fusion, it's probably a lot more likely that you're going to use a Brian, okay? But these days you don't need it as much. There's more free-to-play options, with the panda available and Darien available, and then any other luxury nat 4s or 5s you get. There's plenty of options. Okay, now this is how I use him in TOA. I was going to enter the run. I'll discuss him more as we do the run. So for me, I think Brian is the king of TOA hard, like straight up autoing, right? Like as I said, he has a AoE attack power debuff, and that's really important for TOA hard because they hit so hard. Like they do a lot of damage, right? As you go up in floors. So reducing the attack power is huge in reducing damage, right? So other core units are Beretta and Veramos. Right? These are free to play units that you should have already. These 3 units, I pretty much never take them out if I'm just going to be autoing through like stage, say 50 onwards, right? Because for me, I don't like to manual TOA hard, at least not TOA hard. It's a lot of work. So I try to build a really tanky TOA hard team that I can just auto away my way to victory. So obviously you also need a healer for the team. I have Chasun. Aerial also works. I sometimes use Aerial instead of Chasun. Obviously those two are the best healers, but if you don't have those, you can also use Bella, and Bella will work too. Bella's like with the more free-to-play option, but obviously his healing output is not as good as Chasun or Aerial, but he can still work. It will just depend on how good the rest of your supports are. If you farm the Aria HOH, that was, I think, like it's quite recent, maybe 1.5 months ago. She also provides a lot of CC for your team, so that also helps to reduce the amount of damage you're taking. Because combined with a Brian, you have AOE, attack power debuff, slow, and glancing, right? In addition, both of them are on despair, or typically built on despair. So you have a lot of ways to prevent the amount of damage you're taking, and therefore you should be able to use something like a Bella, right? And also Velmos stuns too. And even Beretta also is built with despair. So you have a lot of ways to stun the opponents. You should typically only be taking damage from, say, 1 or 2 units by the time the opponents move. Right, and therefore you don't really need like a super OP healer, but the big healers do help more on, say, boss stages. And yeah, like if you don't have a Brian, I mean there are other revivers, but they don't provide as much utility as Brian does, so it'll be more difficult to make a TOA hard auto team. You could certainly do TOA hard, with a different reviver, but maybe you might have to manual it a bit more. Now, as far as PvP is concerned, it's very important for him to be quite fast. Like you notice that my Brian has a lot of speed substats, right? And his base speed is actually quite high because his awakening bonus is a speed bonus, 15 speed. And therefore his base speed is like 115. That's really fast, right, for base speed. So it's actually not too hard to make him, fairly fast on substats, as long as you've got, like you've got good rolls on your speed substats. But the reason why he's good in PvP is it gives you a bit of insurance policy again. Like if you're versing something like a Field Mars that can do a lot of damage and kill your nukers. Like typically the way I use Brian is I use Brian with my own Field Mars and Chasun, right? And I bring it when against field compositions where I feel I might need to recover, right? So if I'm not confident of one-shotting the enemy Field Mars before he hits me back, then I bring Brian so that I can trade Field Mars and then Brian can revive and I'm good, right, against the remaining supports. And the other reason why he's good is if you make him fast, most Field Mars are around, like average these days is about 180 speed. So if you can try to make your Brian faster than that, right, you can AoE attack break or deadly waves turn 1, and if he doesn't have will runes, then you can decrease his attack power, and it makes it it makes his damage significantly worse, right? It's very unlikely that he's going to one-shot any of your units unless he's got like a cleanser on his team, right? So if it's like a Field Mars, Veromos, Chasun team, you probably wouldn't deadly wave turn 1 unless his Veromos already moved. But say against a very common composition I use this against is Field Mars, Orion, and Chasun, right? So against that team, like there's no cleansing, so if I attack break or even stun at the same time, then it's reducing a lot of damage that the enemy Field Mars is doing, and that buys me time to take him out, right? And worst case scenario, I can revive and Chasun can heal up. You can also do something similar with Verd. not Verd, sorry, Bella. Bella can be the healer instead of Chasun if you need a free-to-play healer. That still works because he's got AoE healing, so once you revive and use Bella's heal, everyone should be on full HP. It's sort of similar to like Chasun's and Muse. Obviously, you're missing out on attack buff, but Bella also armor breaks and removes buffs, so it's not like he's not like a huge detriment to the team. Alternatively, I know people will have some people auto people teams with say Brian, Bella, and Verd, Verdahal. That's a pretty decent sort of team as well. That can work. Depending on what caliber of opponent you're versing. It's probably more for say low Guardian or Conqueror type fights. It doesn't really work that well in Guardian 3, but yeah, I guess it depends what stage of the game you're at. So yeah. Now, other ways you can use him, you can also use him in arena defense. As long as he's fast, that can work. But I think he mostly excels in Tier A hard and Guild Wars offense for me. The other way you can use him is to use him in Dragons. This is more for beginners, right? I think I showed this in the Beretta Monster Guide as well. But the idea is you bring Brian if you need to kill the towers, right? So the team will look something like this. Okay, so it would look like something like this, and you use Beretta to kill the 2 towers, and then if something accidentally kills a tower, then your Brian can revive for you. Alright, and then you can recover after that. Also, if someone dies to the mini-boss, Zyros mini-boss, that's a very common area for your team to die, or a unit to die, then Brian can also recover from that too. Alright, so this is a pretty good standard team for beginners. If you're lucky enough to have a Brian before you're trying to progress Dragon's B10, he helps a lot. I was fortunate enough to get Brian just before I was working on Dragon's B10, and he helped me immensely, right? Obviously you can use any reviver you want, but Brian is good. If you have Brian at this stage of the game, then he's a good long-term investment, right? You won't regret 6-starring him and giving him some decent runes. Okay, so that's all I have to say about Brian. If you have any other further questions about Brian, feel free to leave a message in comments, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So thanks guys for tuning in, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a good one. Bye.